Level 1. The peak of hubris, the all-in day. You remember the Tuesday the sun felt different. It wasn't just a regular morning in the financial district. It was the day you felt like a god among men. You are Arthur. For the last 3 years, you've been on a winning streak that defied every law of probability. Your net worth had just crossed the $5 million mark, and in your mind, you had already spent the next 50. You were standing at the floor-to-ceiling window of your office, watching the tiny people below, feeling a sense of profound detachment. They were the workers. You were the architect. Your friends, Leo, Sam, and Ben, were gathered around your desk like disciples at an altar. You had just closed a high-leverage trade on a tech spin-off that the boomers at the bank were too terrified to touch. You laughed at their caution. You told Sam that diversification is for people who don't know what they're doing. You were optimizing for absolute speed, convinced that your architectural intelligence was a shield against the volatility of the real world. At this level, your life is a high-speed engine fueled by pure dopamine and the blue light of the terminal. You spent the morning explaining to anyone who would listen that the old rules of risk management were dead, replaced by the new speed of capital. You felt the golden handcuffs, not as a weight, but as a crown. You decided that $5 million was a rounding error. You wanted the level 4 throne, the $100 million legacy. So, you did the one thing every veteran trader warns you against. You went all in. You didn't just bet your liquid cash. You used 10 times leverage. You pledged your house, your future bonuses, and your entire portfolio into a single, concentrated position in a disruptive logistics firm. You believed you were engineering value. That night, you took Leo and Ben to a bar where the whiskey costs more than a monthly mortgage, bragging about how you had automated your success. You didn't see the clouds. You were too busy looking at the reflection of your own smile in the expensive glass. The epiphany happened when you saw a tiny, flickering red ticker on the late-night news about a regulatory shift in Europe. You dismissed it as noise. You thought you were too big to fail. But the market has no memory and no mercy. It only cares about liquidity, and you were about to find out exactly how dry the desert could be. Level 2. The red morning, the initial shock. The silence of 4:30 a.m. is usually peaceful, but this morning, it felt like the breath of a predator. You woke up not to an alarm, but to the frantic, irregular vibration of your phone on the nightstand. It wasn't a single notification. It was a rhythmic assault of high-priority alerts. You are Arthur. And before you even touched the screen, you knew the world you built yesterday had vanished. When you finally swiped up, the light of the phone was a blinding, violent crimson. The flash crash hadn't just begun. It was already gutting the markets. The disruptive firm you had bet your entire legacy on was down 22% in pre-market trading. The air in your lungs suddenly felt like lead. Your heart wasn't just beating. It was a hammer trying to break out of your chest. Initially, you were in level 2. Denial. You tell yourself it was a healthy correction. A temporary glitch in the algorithm that would be bought up by the big players within the hour. You called Leo, the friend who had cheered the loudest during your ascent. You needed a voice of reason, a comrade to tell you everything would be fine. But Leo's voice was different. It was cold distant and clinical. He told you he had exited his position the day before. He didn't tell you. The Brotherhood of the trenches was the first asset to be liquidated. You spent the next 4 hours paralyzed in front of the Bloomberg terminal, your face washed in that haunting blue glow that now felt like a funeral shroud. The internal mathematics of your existence were rapidly deconstructing. With 10 times leverage, a 10% drop didn't just hurt. It meant your entire equity was gone. You were now the accumulator of panic. Every tick downward was a brick being removed from the foundation of your life. You stopped checking social media because you couldn't bear to see the digital footprints of Sam and Ben, who were likely safe in their boring, diversified index funds. You realized that your $7,000 a month apartment, your reputation as the golden boy, and your sense of self were all built on a sheet of thin ice over a very deep ocean. The language around you shifted instantly. Your dedicated private banker didn't call to offer you exclusive venture deals anymore. He called with a voice like a machine to discuss marginal collateral. He was no longer your advisor. He was the repo man of your future. You tried to move capital to cover the margin, but the liquidity in your other assets had dried up like a desert in a heat wave. You were Arthur, and the golden handcuffs were no longer a sign of status. They were shackles that were beginning to draw blood. You realized that making it was a dream you had while walking toward a cliff. Level 3. The margin call, the desperation. It is now 10 a.m., the official opening of the market. And it's not a correction. It's a slaughter. You are Arthur, and for the first time in your life, you are no longer the operator. You are the victim. You are a passenger in a car with no brakes heading toward a concrete wall made of debt. Your phone pings again. It's the call you've been dreading, the margin call. You have exactly 2 hours to deposit $2 million in cash, or the broker will liquidate your entire life at the very bottom of the pit. You are now in level 3, the room of despair. You call Victor, the senior mentor who always praised your boldness. You ask for a bridge loan, a strategic partnership, a lifeline. Victor's voice is polite, almost regretful, but the distance in his tone is infinite. Arthur, he says, you didn't buy a position, you bought a prayer. I can't invest in a prayer. He hangs up. You stop measuring success by annual returns and start measuring it by minutes of survival. You realize that the access you thought you had was purely conditional. You were only invited into the room when you had chips on the table. Now that your chips are being raked away by the house, the door is locking from the outside. You start to see the world not as a map of opportunity, but as a grid of liabilities. Your luxury apartment is no longer a trophy. It's an anchor dragging you into the dark water. You look at your watch, the one without the logo, the piece of silent luxury, and realize it could cover exactly 4 minutes of your current losses. You are crossing the boundary where money stops being something you are and starts being a ghost that is hunting you. You have moved from investor to prey. The stakes are no longer about your legacy. They are about your basic survival. You watch on the screen as your 15% stake in a manufacturing plant is sold for pennies on the dollar to cover a debt you can never fully repay. You are the luxury slave in reverse, working 100 hours a week just to try and reach zero. The isolation is total. Leo, Sam, and Ben have gone silent. You are alone in the terminal's glow. Level 4. The capitulation, the owner of hard truths. The clock strikes noon. The hammer falls. The broker executes the final liquidation. In a matter of seconds, 10 years of 90-hour weeks, missed family gatherings, and calculated risks are erased from the ledger. You are Arthur. And as you sit in the silence of your office, you realize you own nothing but the charcoal suit on your back. This is level 4, the executioner's burden. You have to walk out of that glass office and face the world you thought you had conquered. You walk past the desks of Leo, Sam, and Ben. They don't look at you with envy anymore. They look at you with pity. And in the world of high finance, pity is 1,000 times more painful than hatred. You are the lead actor in a tragedy that everyone saw coming but you. Ownership at this level is about owning your failure. You realized that your strategic arbitrage was just a fancy word for gambling with money that wasn't yours. You sit on a bench outside the glass tower, watching the movers take the mahogany desk you once thought defined your worth. The distance between your capital and the physical world has returned with a vengeance. You feel every fluctuation in the price of gas now. You feel the cost of every meal. Your social circle has narrowed to 0. You're no longer partnering. You are alienated. You realize that the moats and barriers you built were actually walls that kept you trapped in your own hubris. You spend your afternoon not on business strategies, but on legal structures. Not to protect wealth, but to manage the paperwork of bankruptcy. You have reached the point where your failure is institutionalized. You are the architect of your own destruction. You watch Sam take your old chair through the window, his face filled with the same dangerous confidence you had in level 1. You want to shout, to warn him, but the silent language of the system prevents you. You have moved from owner to warning label. Level 5, the institutional shadow, the aftermath. 6 months have passed. You are no longer in the glass towers of Tribeca. You are Arthur, a name whispered in the hallways of the bank as a cautionary tale of what happens when you forget the structure. To the outside world, you are a ghost. To yourself, you are a global capital lesson. You don't hold audience anymore. You apply for jobs. You watch from the sidelines as the market eventually recovers, making billionaires out of the people who were patient while you were greedy. Leo, Sam, and Ben are now aggregated data in your mind. People you lost because you value the yield more than the human connection. The realization at this level is that wealth is power, but power is the ability to survive the crash. Every move you made obscured second and third order consequences that you arrogantly ignored in level 1. You are no longer an allocator of capital. You are a participant in regret. You look back at the breakout millionaire you once were and realize that man was just a child playing with fire in a room full of gasoline. You are now living in a small, quiet apartment where the wind whistles through the vents at night. But this time, there is no neon pulse of the city to keep you company. You see the people who don't just move the capital, but those who design the system that allowed you to fail. You realize the system was designed to prune the arrogant, and you were the first branch to go. You are the allocator of your own sorrow, and your shadow is the only thing left in the room. You start to understand the architecture of silence. Level 6, the architect of silence, the final level. The final level isn't about a net worth statement anymore. It is the level of the architects of the self. You are Arthur, and you have reached the end of the journey. You don't measure wealth by a Forbes list or a Bloomberg terminal. You measure it by the silence. You are the one who finally understands the global financial architecture, not as a way to get rich, but as a machine that eats the soul of those who don't respect its power. You see a young vice president somewhere, and maybe his name is Leo, celebrating a $500,000 bonus. You smile a soft, tired smile from a distance. He thinks he has won the game. He thinks he is the lead actor in a masterpiece. He doesn't realize he is just a single pixel in a masterpiece of cycles that you finally understand. You have lost your family's security for 1,000 years, but you have gained the ultimate truth of the 1%. It was never about the money. It was always about the structure. You are the one who finally knows the rules of the game, but you no longer have the capital to play. You have moved from the tool to the teacher. And as you look out over the world you used to own, you realize that the most powerful thing you can own is not the capital, but the peace that comes after the ego dies. The wind whistles through the trees, and for the first time in 10 years, you don't calculate the cost of the air. You just listen. The game is over, and for the first time, you are truly free.